Peter Russell for an awakening dialogue on Will Pye, and we have no idea what we're going to speak about, Peter.
Right.
This is it, right? Usually we'd have a topic on awakening dialogues, but I asked you to speak and you were open to this idea of just having a dialogue and seeing what wants to be said. So,
much prefer that.
Yeah, it's a nice way of allowing things to unfold rather than the interview format being so fixed and often quite the same questions and all the rest.
Yeah.
So here we are. We can be fairly confident in this, at least. We're here. We're present. We're awake.
To an extent.
To some extent, yeah. And so much happening that we're not aware of. It's easy to forget this, isn't it? The experience we have seems like I'm here in control and the conscious, what I'm conscious of course, is what I'm conscious of. And we know there's so much happening. Science tells us there's so much happening that's actually influencing these words, it's influencing what happens next, it's influencing the gestures and all the rest. And yet there's this sense of someone being here and someone being in control and someone having some influence over things.
Yeah, and that's always there. I mean, we are awakened in a sense, we're always awakened. And that awakeness doesn't change, because what we're awake of, there's degrees of that, how conscious we are of the phenomena we're awake to. And because we get absorbed into the phenomena and how clear they are, or not clear, or whatever it is. But because we're absorbed in the phenomena we're awake to, we overlook that quality of presence, awakeness, which is always there.
So there's that consciousness, we could say, or the awareness sort of gets focused or absorbed into the... Not loud enough?
I didn't press record.
So we can just carry on, and we may have a hug and a laugh in the middle of it as well, which would be wonderfully spontaneous.
And we won't edit you out.
I think absolutely not. I think
Absolutely not. No,
that may well be the highlight of the entire 40 minutes.
We said we don't know what's going to happen, and that's part of not knowing what's going to happen. It's real.
How wonderful.
We said we weren't going to have sculpted questions, and we're not going to edit out the reality.
Indeed, and here we are with a perfect example of this.
Yeah.
And in this moment there can be that, we were speaking of the absorption of consciousness or awareness in the phenomena. And so there was this event that is now in the past, and consciousness, awareness can get absorbed in that, and equally there is this awareness that can be here of awareness of this presence. And this is the work. And work's an unusual word to me.
I know, I never liked that word.
No, it's got a certain edge to it.
Yeah, I've never found a good alternative. I mean, it's play, but it isn't play. It's dedication. I think, in a way, it's a dedication to exploration. But it's, for me, it isn't work. It's being reminded of what it is important to look at, to observe, of where the attention is. But in itself, it's not work.
So there's an ongoing curiosity as to how this experience is unfolding.
Yeah, I think curiosity is a really good word for it. Or some people don't like curiosity, or just being interested. Is that interested in what is actually happening, what is actually going on, and that old question of what is it that is aware. Which again is, as soon as we ask that, we get actually off track, because we start looking for something that is aware, rather than that recognition that, as we're saying, awareness is.
And that question tends to, I know you've had decades and decades of experience and inquiry in the different terminologies and so on, it tends to engage the mind in, well, it's this and it's that, or it could be the answer that arose from a previous insight or realization. I like interested as opposed to curious. It seems to have a slightly different... I like curious a lot as well, but when you spoke interested, that's got a little bit of a softer, more gentle, just sort of...
Yeah.
I'm interested in what's happening here without being too superimposing ourselves.
Well, I think for me, curious is the right word. And I was purely saying that because I find some people don't relate to curious in quite the same way. I mean, for curious has an innocence to it. It's like, what is this? What's actually going on? And it's almost synonymous with being interested. So I was purely saying that because some people feel curiosity is like, oh. Whereas for me, it's just like, what is actually happening?
And you mentioned innocence. Curious for me, personified is the child who is just curious about everything. The light, the shape, and we have in Zen and in Christianity this notion of honouring that curiousness, that state of childhood, and bringing that to our everyday experience.
Except ye be as little children, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Something like that, and beginner's mind and so on in Zen.
I think there's a lot of truth there. I mean, because the kingdom of heaven is, to me, that our essence. And in that essence is that stillness, that peace, the ease, what we're looking for, and that is the realm of heaven. That is the realm of our natural being, but it's the realm of, in Indian thought we might call ananda, bliss, peace, ease. And except you have that innocence, you will not fall back into it. It's when you lose the innocence and there's the trying, the wanting, the debating and the thinking, and we get caught up in our head, we're actually taking ourselves in the opposite direction. And for me, the innocence is about just letting go, letting go.
And in that innocence and in that letting go, for me, that's the collapse almost into heaven.
Yeah.
So heaven, of course, not as a place we may or may not go to when we die, but I would think of it as a state of consciousness. And I think Jesus, I always refer people to that quote that the kingdom of heaven is within you. Yeah. It's not somewhere to seek outside. So this seems very straightforward, and yet this is a radical idea for the mainstream, that heaven is here and here.
Right.
It's,
and the actual word in Greek means at hand, but people translate that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's like it's about to happen, and like in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, or 5 minutes' time, the kingdom of heaven is going to arrive. But it is at hand in the sense it is close, it is right here, it is right close by. It isn't somewhere we're going to get to. In a sense, it's the opposite. All our trying to get somewhere is holding us away from where we want to be.
Which is right here.
Yeah.
And I know you're friends with Eckhart Tolle. What came to mind there, one of his great clarities is of course around this present moment, around this now. And in that idea of the kingdom of heaven, or the idea of wakefulness, the mind will typically step into time and imagine it being somewhere other than this place now. And working with groups, I see this again and again. There's an experience of peace arises, and then the mind will jump in and refer back or forward. So yes, peace is here now, but yesterday I was really, but this is not going to last for the next week. So don't worry about that. Yeah. Just now.
Yeah. Or then how can I get back to peace? When's it going to come? And
yeah. And this it seems most helpful again to with all this, to allow this, to embrace at the start of our conversation. You spoke of this doesn't go away. And this seems to be a common misconception about what awakening might be, that an experience happens and then there's a cessation of mind, or a cessation of thought, or a complete resolution of neuroses or personal patternings and so on. I know that certainly hasn't been my experience.
So what hasn't been your experience?
So me has continued to unfold.
Okay.
And I very, very much had the same tendencies in movement of thought and so on. And there's been changes, but really Will Pye is kind of just as he was, and yet radically different through this process.
Yeah.
And it seems for me to cause a lot of harm and suffering for people who are going through this process of waking up. This idea that there'll be an experience, and then suffering is done, suffering is finished, no more confusion, just perfect peace and clarity forevermore. And again, not my experience, though I can see what that's pointing to.
Yeah, I mean it is. I mean, there's a few people like Eckhart Tolle and a few others where it is, you drop in and that's it. You're there and you never forget it. But for most people, I think it's a gradual process of dipping in, falling out, dipping in, falling out. And yeah, I mean, I get, caught up in my stuff almost as much as ever. But now there's that realization when I'm suffering is the recognition that the suffering is in a way my creation over something, the way I'm seeing it, how I'm caught up in it, but the knowing that if I just step back and reconnect with that sense of being, quality, self, presence, however you want to label it, and drop back into that, it all just totally dissolves and goes. The suffering is gone. I mean, a minute later it may be back again.
Yeah, right.
But that is that continual tasting and the ability to just step out and say, this is what they were all talking about. This is what they all discovered when you let go of the resistance to what is and the stories that are going on about what is and how it should be or shouldn't be and the trying to make it different or work out what you should do and all that stuff. When that just dissolves, it's just...
And in this experience, it's complete for the second that it's occurring.
Yeah.
There's no need for it to be extrapolated out. It's just like, here it is. This is worth dying for, and it sort of almost is a death of sorts because it is that usual noise settling. It's that resistance or pushing away or seeking desire and aversion and so on.
Yeah.
Falls, and we can rest in this.
It's a death of the struggling and a death of the suffering that comes with that, but it's an awakening to the reality that is always there, and it's so. Yeah, it's a death on one level, and I think people get scared of that. People say, "Oh, I don't want to lose. What's going to happen? I'm so scared. If I lose myself, if I lose my ego, if I lose myself, who am I going to be?" And it's like, you're going to be exactly who you are now, but instead of being caught up in all your machinations and fears and worries, you're going to be the same you, just noticing how easy it is, instead of noticing how difficult it is.
Are you in partnership with infinite awareness, we could say, rather than striving against? Are you in harmony with life as it's unfolding?
Yeah.
You mentioned the suffering, how we can recognize that I have caused it. Essentially, it's a misdirection of attention or whatever it might be. What I've also experienced is that some of the most intense suffering, particularly sort of post-awakening, whatever that means, not that any event ever happened or anything like this, but to look at some of the intense suffering that has arisen since then, and the perspective arising that actually this is wakefulness having the experience of Will Pye having the experience of suffering. This is actually life itself, obviously wanting to have the experience of this character having the experience of what he's experiencing. And how do I know that life wants that? Well, because it's happening, and that seems to be a really simple way of determining whether experience is right or wrong. If it's happening, it's right. if it's not happening.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I mean, I get what you're saying. I'm not sure
Is it the right and wrong as terminologies?
I think so, yes. If everything is, this is what is.
Yes.
And I can have preferences.
Of course.
And what is when it arises, and I think this is where the practice comes. It's when you realize you've got caught up in some story or something again, then there is enough awareness or enough knowing that this is what is happening, and there's enough glimmer to know that I am actually creating this, and I don't mean creating the experience, but I am I think the suffering always comes back to resistance. I think it comes back to resisting what is, and to recognize it's like, maybe it's something to do with my resistance that's causing the suffering, rather than all these things happening out there and the people who are not doing what I think they should be doing and all of that. And that glimmer is enough to say, okay, yes, come back. And each one of those dropping back in, for me, is a reinforcement of that knowing. And so that glimmer of like, I could be seeing this differently, gets stronger and stronger. And so it becomes easier and easier to drop back in. I remember, the first times that happened, it was like, wow, how did that? It would be on meditation retreats and something like, wow, what did I do? How did that happen? Like, what was, this is wonderful. It's
How
like,
can I bottle this? How can I make this
Yeah, so
perpetual
like, this is so,
experience.
it's like telling everybody, like, even on a retreat, like, want to say, hey, I just, I know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just gets like, it just gets easier.
And so the ending of suffering, it's often spoken of as like an event in time and it's all done, but what I'm hearing here in your experience is that, and it speaks to mine, is that it's an ongoing, we end suffering again and again and again, which is almost has a greater practicality in terms of sharing. If one is in a sort of state of complete cessation of mind activity, then it's almost like that's not so helpful to most people. But if we can explore and say, well, this is how we might now end suffering, it's got a great practical utility.
Right, and that is the practice for me, that practice of time and time again ending suffering. And so that, yes, it becomes a state that's accessed more easily and more often.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what many teachings say, it gradually builds up to the time when it becomes the prevalent reality. I'm not even sure permanent, because even the Dalai Lama says, he gets angry, but he doesn't get caught up in it. He lets it go. But I imagine in that moment of anger, I don't know. I mean, either in that moment of anger, he is anger, and he's totally at ease, noticing the anger, or he's angry, but he doesn't actually take it on as a ongoing thing. It's like, okay, I'm angry, and then you just let it go and come back.
And doesn't spend weeks presumably thinking, oh no, I'm the Dalai Lama, I shouldn't be experiencing anger. There's a quick letting go of it. I recall an interview with, speaking of Eckhart again, when he said, I think the interviewer said, so you haven't experienced irritation or anything? And he said, I think it was about 6 months ago. So this is, I think most of us would settle for that. A little bit of irritation every 6 months.
Well, just a little bit each day, I'd say.
Yeah, we could just space it out over the day or over the week. This makes good sense. What comes back to me also in this, we were talking at the start about the using the word work and curiosity and interest and so on. So in this actual process of that we're looking at the ending of suffering again and again, I do like this word play at this point, because we can get so caught up in our process, we can get so caught up, and it can become quite stodgy and serious. Someone said to me earlier on that I'm serious, and this is true sometimes. I know that a playfulness around those serious matters. There's that Oscar Wilde quote that life is far too important to take seriously.
Exactly.
So it's having the dedication and the commitment, and simultaneously being able to step into that playfulness. And
right. Well, I think it was taking it lightly.
Yeah.
Taking it lightly, and so part of the curiosity is then becomes the result of the curiosity for me is then a fascination. It's like, oh my God, that's how I was getting stuck. That's where I was getting it. It was just as simple as that. But it's like, it's a fascination which almost becomes a very, very soft little sort of excitement. And
amusement sometimes?
Yes, there is an amusement. It's like, almost like laughing.
Yeah. I myself is hilarious. When I catch some of the ways that it gets caught up in itself, it can be like, and particularly, often it's not funny when we're caught up in suffering, far from it. And yet, you were speaking of the more we have that experience, the more we step out of the confusion into clarity, or the more we step out of resistance into letting go, it becomes more normal. And for me, there's that amusement often comes from recognizing that it was completely unnecessary, and that I've been here a million times before, and yet still this little moment of confusion, and it's like, how wonderful. And in the laughter there's such expanse and such freedom.
And how could I get caught up so easily and forget this? It's like,
and of course, there's
compassion in that as well.
I think so. It's not a laughter of like, you idiot, but rather a sweet, gentle laughter, a kindness in there, which seems so important. prevalent in many people's experience. I think it comes to a head so often in spiritual inquiry and practice, is that inner critic, that harsh judge. And I know in my own experience that's been true all the more so when such clarity and peace has been experienced, and we start to see how valuable that can be for people around us. And then if there's a depressed energy comes up, or there's an irritation, or I found the mind will catch on to that as being not enough, as being bad will for not maintaining those highest states of consciousness and so on. And so it's another sort of subtle way that the mind would create suffering in there.
Yeah, I mean, I get that when it's like, I've been caught up for so long in some stories. Yeah, it's a little, not sure it's quite judgment or criticism. It's almost like it's more in the direction of, not quite sadness, but shame, but sort of something like that. Not shame in the normal sense of shame, but a pity that that happened. It's like,
Because I think when I heard sadness, that was interesting for me, because there is an incredible sadness to be anything other than the peace and open-heartedness and joyful curiousness that we are, that our true nature is. So that sadness seems to have a real validity and an intelligence and a wisdom to it as well.
Yeah. But most of the time when I'm caught up in some sort, I don't even realize I'm caught up in it, because it seems so important that I get whatever it is sorted out or complained about or something. It seems so important that my attention is totally absorbed in working out how to manage myself, the other person, the situation, what to do. My attention is so absorbed in that, there's no space to recognize anything else. And that's why that glimmer comes in. It's like, oh. Yeah,
that expression and that sort of captures it for me as well. And for me, I've been hearing a lot at this conference that we're at Sand now, the different energies that we embody in us, the masculine and the feminine. It seems that the masculine wants to solve this problem, and it's an intelligence in this, of course, to get absorbed and to resolve this. And in the letting go, in the softness and the allowing, this would speak to me of a more feminine energy and opening up to the experience at every stage. And so the confusion and then the sadness about again and again softening and opening to this.
Yeah.
And it seems that there's a process of learning to discern which mode of being, which way of being is most required, most skillful at this period. I know I've sort of fluctuated between times of, excuse me, of great intensity of practice and focus and probably taking it quite seriously, and other times where it's been clear that surrendering, letting go, is really all I need to be doing.
Right.
All that's required, softening and softening.
And yet it's taking that letting go seriously, but not taking the issue seriously. It's taking it seriously in terms of giving it value and importance.
Putting it at the top of your to-do list.
Right, that's what it's almost like the dedication.
Yeah.
The dedication to letting go.
Yeah.
To dropping back in, or whatever, however you want to put it.
And it seems we've touched a little bit on some of the paradoxical qualities of this whole process, and so often this seems to create confusion, because we can talk about the striving and the dedication that generally is required at times, and the mind can say, well, that's different from the surrendering or letting go, so one is better or one is required and the other is not. And yet it's both, isn't it? It seems that at different times each are required. And the whole journey seems so paradoxical. I've heard it said that truth is paradoxical, or truth is paradox. And it seems to me again and again this is found to be true. So the very experience of the Will Pye character and me being individuated, and this being a very convincing experience, and the problem being convincing at times, with this expanse, with this vastness that can be tapped into, and that very essence of the human experience is a paradox.
Yeah. And I forgot where I was going with this.
Our camera person just left the room. It's quite an interesting situation, isn't it? We had a
We're now
camera
alone
person.
here.
Yeah, I've been given instructions on how to press the red button when we're finished, and so
where should we go to finish? What is
what is unsaid?
Where are we going? What needs to be pointed to?
Well, how about just this? How about simply this? This that's being experienced right now.
Mm-hmm.
This presence and this joy of communication. This delight of being in a body and words coming out of my mouth and a head nodding, so I'm assuming that the words are being understood.
Yeah.
It's rather precious and utterly ordinary.
And coming back to where we started, and the recognition that there is the I, not the Peter Russell I, the individual I, but that sense of I-ness that's been there all my life. It's always there, that same, even I-ness has got that sense of me-ness, that close, what is so familiar, is here observing, not even observing, it's knowing, is that which I am. My being is knowing the experience of you, the joy, the charm, the laughter, the nodding, whatever, is that is there as ever. And we overlook, I mean, I like, just thinking recently, the Indian word avidya, which means is the negation, vidya is knowledge, knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And avidya is usually translated as ignorance, but that becomes misunderstood. It's like they talk about the ignorance of knowing one's true nature, and it's seen as ignorance in terms of understanding ignorance, so you don't know about it.
Sure.
But to me, it's about, it's an ignoring. We are so caught up, even in the joys and everything, there's it's an overlooking. We overlook
what is so here.
What is so here, what is always here, and it's almost bringing the attention back to that which is always here, which never changes, but it gets overlooked because we are so just naturally caught up in the experience, and not necessarily the bad ones, but the happy ones, the joys, the what's happening.
And it can be a sweet thing amidst the most beautiful times, the most joyful times, to take a moment just to recognize what's really experiencing all this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we're most interested in having that capacity to drop from the suffering and from the pain, and yet it is equally valuable, I think, for the consciousness, for the awareness, to do the same when we're caught up in joy and delight.
Yeah. And it's that. And even then to say, what is experiencing this? It's just something I'm particular about. The words can lead us in the wrong direction. Because say, what is experiencing this? We start looking for it. Okay, what is it? What is it that's experiencing this? It's like, but it's more just the recognition that I am experiencing this, but the I is not noticed. It's
fully integrated with the whole experience.
It's that we are so absorbed in that. We're absorbed in what we are experiencing, the phenomenon of experience. The attention is there, and we don't notice that which is attending. And I think that's part of just letting the attention soften, and we drop back into noticing the I that is attending to this moment.
And I like what I was seeing there with your body language, was it's sort of that attention going back in. It's almost like there's a going back to seeing the show in front of it. And hearing you speak of ignorance, what came up for me was the power of, or the intelligence of not knowing, and to regularly recognize. When you're a highly educated Cambridge graduate and achieved all sorts in academia, I wonder how that's rolled for you, to play with that as a recognition of our not knowing at times as well, because the mind knows so much, and that's true. And also it's true that in this speck of consciousness there's a total ignorance. Really no idea what's actually happening. That not as a friend described, not as I don't know, but as a not knowing. That seems to me to be an access point to that stillness, that observing, that experience of being aware.
Yeah. And it's almost dropping knowing in the conventional sense.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing to be known or not to be known. It's collapsing that whole division, the division of me knowing something or not knowing something. And that ignorance, as you were pointing to, I think there is, it's not an ignorance of anything in particular. Right. But it's an ignoring of what is.
It isn't even a deliberate ignoring, it's a not noticing. It's a not noticing that which is ever present.
I like that word, noticing, and for me this can be useful to collapse it back on itself, that noticing the noticing. So to actually notice this noticing.
Yeah.
Oh wow, here it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been a real joy chatting with you, Peter.
Yeah.
There's a appreciation of being in this room, and the camera person's left, and this conversation's happened, and I don't know about you, but I think we're probably due lunch quite soon. What do you think?
I think so. My body says so.
Yeah.
My mind is agreeing with my body as well.
I'm experiencing that unity and harmony as well. So thank you so much for joining us today on Awakening Dialogues, and it's been a real pleasure.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you.